In the long memory of humanity, there were ages when the stars were distant and cold, and ages when they were near enough to touch. Before the Imperium, before the great banners of conquest were raised, humanity had wandered alone through a darkness filled with silence and forgotten echoes. Worlds had lived and died without witness. Civilizations had risen beneath alien suns and vanished into dust before their names could travel beyond their own skies. The void was vast, and humanity was scattered like embers cast into an endless night. And yet, there came a time when the silence ended. It began not with thunder, nor with the clash of armies, but with a presence on the cradle world of Terra. Beneath skies burdened by the weight of ancient ruin, there walked a being whose existence carried the gravity of inevitability. He did not announce himself with proclamation. He did not demand worship or recognition. He simply endured, as he had endured across countless generations, watching, waiting, guiding with careful patience. He had seen humanity at its brightest, and he had seen it brought low. He had watched as knowledge was lost, as unity fractured, as fear and isolation replaced hope. He had observed the slow fading of a species that had once reached for the infinite, and in that long watching, he had understood what must be done. He was not merely a ruler. He was a unifier. In those days, Terra was a fractured world, divided among countless warlords and tyrants. The scars of old night still marked its surface, and the memory of unity was little more than myth. But one by one, those divisions fell away, not through chaos, but through design. Armies were forged, not only from strength, but from purpose. Warriors clad in armor of unmatched craftsmanship marched beneath banners that bore not the mark of conquest, but of restoration. They did not bring annihilation. They brought order, and where resistance rose, it was met with certainty. The wars of unification were not brief, nor were they gentle. They were necessary. Each victory brought Terra closer to wholeness. Each conquered fortress removed another fragment of division, and at the center of it all stood the one who had begun it. He did not age. He did not falter. He endured in time. Terra was no longer a world of warring fragments, but a single realm bound together beneath one will. The storms of old night had begun to recede, and for the first time in untold generations, humanity stood united upon its home world. But Terra was only the beginning. Beyond its skies lay a galaxy filled with lost human worlds. Colonies founded in forgotten ages, now isolated by the long darkness, had endured in solitude. Some had prospered. Others had regressed. Many had forgotten their origins entirely. They waited, though they did not know it. And when the Imperium reached the stars, it did so with purpose. Great vessels were constructed in orbit above Terra, their hulls vast and silent. They were not mere ships, but instruments of reconnection. Each carried with it the promise of reunion, the return of humanity to itself. At their head stood the Emperor. He did not speak often, but when he did, his words carried the weight of destiny. He did not promise comfort. He promised unity. The Great Crusade began not as an act of conquest, but as an act of restoration. Fleets departed from Terra in slow, deliberate waves, slipping into the void with solemn determination. They traveled along routes that had once been known, guided by fragments of ancient maps and the intuition of those who understood the hidden pathways of the stars. And as they traveled, they found humanity. World after world emerged from the darkness. Some greeted the Imperium with relief, recognizing in its banners a return of something long lost. Others met it with suspicion. Their memories of unity faded into caution and fear. There were those who resisted, unwilling to surrender the independence they had forged in isolation. But the Imperium endured. It did not falter in its purpose. It did not abandon its vision. Where diplomacy could succeed, it was offered. Where force was required, it was applied with precision. The result was always the same. Humanity, divided for so long, began to become whole once more. And with each reunited world, the Imperium grew stronger. Yet the Emperor did not stand alone in this endeavor. Around him gathered figures of immense capability, individuals whose loyalty and strength reflected the magnitude of his purpose. They were not merely commanders. They were extensions of his will, entrusted with the responsibility of carrying unity across the galaxy. Among them was one whose presence would become legend. He was a first among equals, a son not of blood, but of design. His mind was keen, his resolve unbreakable, and his devotion absolute. At the emperor's side, he learned not only the art of war, but the nature of leadership. He listened, he observed, he understood. Together, they stood at the forefront of humanity's return to the stars. Where the emperor was distant and eternal, this son was visible and immediate. He spoke with warriors. He walked among the ranks. He carried the emperor's purpose into the hearts of those who served. And in his presence, the Imperium found confidence. The fleets moved outward, their passage marking the slow awakening of a species that had slept for too long. Each victory was not merely the defeat of opposition, but the restoration of connection. Each compliance brought another fragment of humanity back into fold. The Imperium was not yet the vast entity it would become. It was still young, still forming, still discovering its own shape, but already it carried the weight of inevitability. Across the void, the Emperor watched. He did not celebrate. He did not rest. He simply continued, his vision extending beyond the present, beyond the immediate victories, towards something greater. His mind encompassed not only what was, but what could be. He saw humanity united not by fear, but by purpose, a humanity that would endure. And those who followed him believed. They believed in the Imperium. They believed in its future. They believed in him. In the quiet chambers of his great vessel, far from the noise of marching armies and the distant thunder of compliance, the emperor stood in silence, his gaze turned toward the endless stars. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence alone was enough. And across the galaxy, carried by fleets of steel and legions of unwavering loyalty, his will moved outward, steady and unstoppable, like the slow turning of the cosmos itself. The night was vast, but it was no longer empty, and in that growing expanse of reclaimed light, humanity began to remember what it had once been and what it might yet become. The stars waited in stillness, holding their ancient vigil, as the Imperium took its first certain steps into eternity. In the earliest decades of the Great Crusade, when the Imperium was still young and its shape not yet fixed, there emerged a figure whose presence would come to define its forward momentum. He was not born as other men were born. He had not known the slow passage of childhood, nor the fragile uncertainty of human growth. He had been made for a purpose that extended beyond the ordinary measure of existence. In him, strength and intellect existed in careful balance, shaped according to a design older than the Imperium itself. He was the first to stand aside the Emperor as both student and commander to the warriors of the Imperium. He was a symbol of proximity to something greater than themselves. Where the Emperor remained distant, vast in thought and responsibility, this son walked among them. He spoke where the Emperor was silent. He acted where the Emperor observed. His presence gave form to the Emperor's intent. He did not replace the Emperor's authority. He reflected it in the command halls of the great expeditionary fleets. His voice carried calmly across ranks of officers and remembrancers, navigators and warriors. He did not need to raise it. His certainty alone commanded attention. Those who heard him understood that they stood at the center of something that would outlast their own lifetimes. He carried no doubt, and so those who followed him carried none either. At his side marched warriors unlike any humanity had seen before. They were taller, stronger, and more enduring than ordinary men. Their armor bore the marks of careful craftsmanship, its surfaces reflecting the cold light of distant stars. They moved with discipline, their actions guided not by impulse, but by absolute clarity of purpose. They were the Emperor's chosen instruments. They had been created to endure where others could not, to advance where others would falter, and to bring unity to worlds that had forgotten their place within humanity's greater whole. To them, the Emperor was more than a sovereign. He was the source of their existence, and his son was the voice that carried that existence forward. World by world, the Crusade advanced. There were planets where the Imperium's arrival was met with reverence. On those worlds, the people gathered beneath unfamiliar skies and watched as the great ships descended through their atmosphere. They saw in those vessels not invaders, but the return of something that had been lost to them. They listened as the Imperium spoke of unity, of shared origin, of a future no longer limited by isolation. Many accepted without resistance. Others did not. There were worlds where humanity had grown apart from its origins, where isolation had shaped cultures that no longer recognized Terra as their ancestral home. On those planets, the Imperium's arrival was met with suspicion, with fear, and sometimes with violence. In those moments, the son of the Emperor did not hesitate. He understood the weight of his responsibility. War, when it came, was swift and decisive. The Imperium did not wage war for destruction. It waged war for compliance. Its objective was not the erasure of humanity's lost branches, but their restoration. Yet restoration required acceptance, and acceptance was not always given freely. So the fleets advanced, so the warriors descended, so the banners of the Imperium were raised above cities that had never known their symbol. And when it was done, the silence that followed was not one of death, but of transformation. Each reunited world became part of something greater than itself. Each compliance strengthened the Imperium's foundation. And through it all, the Emperor remained at the center, guiding the crusade not through constant presence, but through enduring vision. There were times when he walked among his warriors. Those moments were rare, but they were never forgotten. Those who stood in his presence felt the weight of history itself pressing against their senses. They understood, without words, that they stood before a being whose existence extended beyond ordinary understanding. His gaze carried no uncertainty. His purpose allowed no deviation. He spoke not of conquest, but of destiny. He spoke not of power, but of unity. And those who heard him carried his words with them long after he had departed. His son listened more closely than any other. In the quiet moments between campaigns, he stood beside the Emperor and learned. He absorbed not only strategy, but perspective. He came to understand that the crusade was more than a military endeavor. It was an act of reconstruction, the careful reassembly of a species that had once been whole. He came to understand the burden of command. He did not question it. He accepted it fully. And in accepting it, he became indispensable. The warriors saw in him the certainty they needed. The officers saw in him the clarity they followed. The Imperium saw in him its future taking shape. Yet even as the crusade expanded, the galaxy remained vast beyond comprehension. There were regions where the light of the Imperium had not yet reached. There were stars that still burned in isolation. There were worlds untouched by reunion. There were civilizations that waited in ignorance of what was coming. The crusade would reach them all. It was only a matter of time. From the command decks of his flagship, the son of the Emperor often stood in silence, watching the slow movement of stars beyond the viewing ports. He observed their distant light, knowing that each point of brightness represented another step in humanity's long return. He did not feel triumph. He felt responsibility. The Imperium was not yet complete. Its unity was still fragile, its future still unwritten. And so he remained vigilant. The fleets continued their outward journey, their engines carrying them into regions where no human vessel had traveled in centuries. Behind them, the Imperium grew stronger. Ahead of them, the unknown waited in patient silence. And at the center of it all, guiding without hesitation, stood the Emperor and the Son who carried his will into the darkness. Together, they moved forward. Together, they reshaped the destiny of humanity. And the stars, ancient and unmoving, bore silent witness as the Imperium's first great era unfolded in calm, unstoppable certainty. As the decades of Great Crusade unfolded, the Imperium's presence spread outward in widening circles, like ripples upon a still and ancient sea. Each newly reached system became another point of light in a growing constellation of unity. And with every passing year, the darkness that had once isolated humanity receded further into memory. The fleets did not move at random. Their paths were deliberate, guided by careful calculation and the Emperor's distant design. Ancient records, fragmentary and incomplete, provided the first clues. From these remnants, the Imperium traced the faint outlines of humanity's forgotten domain. Where uncertainty remained, there was patience. Where obstacles arose, there was resolve. Nothing was left to chance. Within the vast hulls of the expeditionary vessels, life continued in ordered rhythm. Generations of mortal crew lived and died beneath artificial skies, their existence devoted entirely to the continuation of the crusade. To them, the Imperium was not an abstract ideal, but the structure that gave meaning to their lives. They served without hesitation, knowing that their labor sustained something far greater than themselves. They asked for nothing in return. They required nothing more. The warriors who stood at the forefront of compliance were unchanged in their purpose. They descended upon distant worlds with the same calm certainty that had defined the Crusade from its beginning. Their armor bore the marks of countless campaigns, yet their discipline never faltered. They were the constant presence of the Imperium's will, unyielding and precise, and always at the center of their advance stood the Emperor's son. His reputation spread faster than the fleets themselves. On worlds not yet reached by the Imperium, rumors began to circulate. Stories passed between isolated human civilizations, carried by fragments of intercepted transmissions or the testimony of long-range probes. They spoke of a great reunification, of a figure who walked among the stars as a living embodiment of Terra's authority. Some dismissed these accounts as myth. Others listened more closely. When the Imperium arrived, it did so not as a stranger, but as a fulfillment of something long anticipated. On many worlds, compliance was achieved without conflict. The mere presence of the expeditionary fleets, their scale and organization beyond anything most civilizations had ever witnessed, was enough to demonstrate the inevitability of unity. Delegations were sent. Oaths were sworn. The banners of the Imperium were raised. These moments were marked not by celebration, but by solemn acceptance. Each compliance was recorded with precision. Every world was cataloged, its resources measured, its people counted, its future place within the Imperium carefully defined. Administrators followed in the wake of the warriors, establishing the structures that would bind each planet to Terra's distant authority. It was a process of careful integration. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was overlooked. Yet there were worlds where the process unfolded differently. Isolation had shaped humanity in many forms. Some civilizations had grown inward, their cultures hardened by centuries of solitude. Others had turned their knowledge toward purposes that no longer aligned with Terra's vision. On these worlds, compliance required more than diplomacy. It required demonstration. The son of the Emperor understood this necessity without hesitation. He did not seek war, but neither did he avoid it when it became unavoidable. He recognized that unity could not remain incomplete. Every lost fragment of humanity represented both a responsibility and a risk. The Crusade could not leave fragments behind. And so, when resistance arose, it was met with swift and overwhelming response. The warriors descended from the heavens like silent giants, their arrival breaking the illusions of independence that had persisted for generations. Battles were fought, brief and decisive. Fortresses that had stood for centuries fell in a matter of hours. Armies that had never known defeat were overcome with measured precision. When it was finished, the Imperium remained. It did not withdraw. It endured, and in the silence that followed, new order emerged. Those who had resisted came to understand the scale of what they had opposed. They saw that the Imperium was not a passing force, but a permanent presence. Its reach extended beyond any single world, beyond any single lifetime. It was a future made manifest. Throughout these campaigns, the Emperor himself remained distant. His appearances were rare, and when he withdrew from the forefront of the Crusade, his absence was felt not as weakness, but as trust. He had entrusted his son with the continuation of the Imperium's expansion, and that trust was never betrayed. The son carried the burden willingly. He did not falter. He did not question. In the quiet hours between campaigns, he reflected upon the enormity of what they were building. The Imperium was no longer a fragile creation confined to Terra and its immediate domain. It had become something vast, something self-sustaining. Its momentum no longer depended upon any single victory. It had become inevitable. Yet even inevitability required vigilance. From the command deck of his vessel, he watched the endless motion of the stars. Each point of light represented both achievement and obligation. Each reunited world strengthened the Imperium, but also increased the weight of responsibility it carried. He understood that unity was not a single act. It was a continuous process. Behind him, countless billions lived beneath the Imperium's protection. Ahead of him, countless more waited in silence, unaware that their isolation was nearing its end. The Crusade would reach them. It would bring them into the light of unity. It would restore what had been lost. And through it all, The Emperor remained a constant presence at the center of existence, his vision guiding every movement, his will shaping every decision, even from afar. He did not need to speak. His purpose was already in motion. The fleets continued their steady advance, their passage marked only by the faint distortion of starlight and the quiet certainty of their mission. They moved without haste, without doubt, and without end. And in the vast stillness between the stars, the Imperium grew, its expanding light carrying humanity forward into a future that seemed, for the first time in countless ages, both unified and eternal. There were moments, rare and measured, when the Emperor stood among his warriors once more. Such moments did not arrive with warning. They did not follow ceremony or announcement. One day, he was distant, his will carried across the stars through the structure he had created. And then, without fanfare, he was present again, walking the silent halls of his great vessels, his golden armor reflecting the cold illumination of distant suns. Those who saw him did not speak of it loudly. They carried the memory inward, preserving it with quiet reverence. His presence altered the atmosphere around him. It was not a matter of fear nor simple authority. It was something deeper, something older. Those who stood near him felt the weight of vast perspective, as though they stood beside a being who existed not only in the present, but across the uncounted passage of time itself. He moved without urgency. He did not need haste. The Imperium was already in motion. In the strategium chambers of his flagship, he stood beside his son, observing the slow rotation of stellar projections suspended in the air before them. Thousands of stars glowed in miniature, each one marked with careful precision. Some burned with the steady light of compliance achieved. Others remained dim, awaiting the Imperium's arrival. The Emperor's gaze moved across them all. He saw not points of light, but the shape of humanity's future. His son stood beside him, silent and attentive. He did not interrupt. He understood that the Emperor's silence was not absence of thought, but its fullest expression. In that stillness, entire strategies were formed, entire futures considered and measured. When the Emperor spoke, his voice was calm, measured, certain. He spoke not only of the next campaign, but of what must follow beyond it. He spoke of stability, of endurance, of foundations that would outlast the crusade itself. He reminded his son that conquest was only the beginning. What mattered was what came after. Unity must be preserved. Unity must be protected. His son listened, absorbing each word with absolute clarity. He did not see himself as separate from the Emperor's will. He saw himself as its extension, its instrument in motion. Where the Emperor remained the still center, he would be the movement that carried that center outward. This was the order of things. Beyond the strategium, the Imperium continued its endless labor. Entire worlds were transformed in the wake of compliance. On planets that had once known only isolation, new structures rose beneath unfamiliar skies. Shipyards were constructed in orbit, their skeletal frames expanding slowly as they gave birth to new vessels of the crusade. Administrators arrived to establish governance. Engineers restored lost technologies. Scholars recorded histories that had been fragmented by time. Each action was deliberate, part of the greater design that would bind humanity into lasting unity. The Emperor observed it all. He did not intervene in every detail. He did not need to. He had created the system that would sustain itself. And yet, there were moments when he chose to walk among those who served him. On one such world, newly brought into compliance, he descended alone, accompanied only by the silent presence of his guardians. The people of that planet gathered in stillness as he passed among them. They had known nothing of terror. They had lived and died beneath their own sky for countless generations. Now, they stood in the presence of the one who had come from the distant origin of their species. He did not speak to them as a conqueror. He spoke to them as their sovereign. He told them not of submission, but belonging. He told them that they were no longer alone. He told them that their future was now part of something greater than anything they had known before. They listened, they understood, and in their understanding, the Imperium grew stronger. When he returned to his vessel, he did not linger. His work was not confined to any single world. His responsibility extended across the entirety of humanity's domain, both reclaimed and yet to be found. His son was waiting. Together, they resumed the work of expansion. There were no celebrations. There was only continuation. The crusade pressed onward, its momentum unbroken. Fleet after fleet departed into the unknown, carrying with them the Emperor's vision. Each commander knew their role. Each warrior understood their purpose. There was no uncertainty, only direction. Yet even as the Imperium expanded, the Emperor's presence became less frequent. His appearances grew more distant, his attention drawn increasingly toward Terra itself. There, beneath the ancient skies of humanity's birthplace, work of profound importance continued unseen. Few understood its nature. Fewer still were permitted to witness it. But his absence from the front lines did not weaken the crusade. His son remained. He carried forward with the same certainty, the same unwavering devotion. He spoke with the Emperor's authority. He commanded with the Emperor's trust. The Imperium did not falter in its expansion, for its foundation had already been secured. Still, there were those among the warriors who felt the subtle change. They did not question it. They did not doubt, but they noticed. The Emperor had stepped back, not in retreat, but in preparation. His vision extended beyond the present moment, beyond the victories of the crusade. He saw a future that required more than conquest. He saw a future that required permanence. And so, he entrusted the continuation of the crusade to the one he had shaped for that purpose. From the observation decks of his vessel, his son stood alone, watching the distant stars. Their light remained unchanged, indifferent to the struggles and triumphs unfolding among them. Yet within that indifference, the Imperium continued to grow, its presence spreading steadily across the void. He did not feel abandonment. He felt responsibility. The Emperor's work continued, whether seen or unseen. And as the fleets moved onward, carrying humanity ever further into the silent depths of the galaxy, the Emperor's presence remained. Not always visible, not always near, but constant, enduring, and absolute, like the distant stars themselves, watching over all that had been and all that would be. As the Emperor's physical presence became increasingly centered upon Terra, the responsibility of carrying the Imperium's expansion fell more fully upon his son. This transition did not occur suddenly. It unfolded gradually, with a quiet inevitability that had come to define every aspect of the Great Crusade. There was no formal declaration, no single moment that marked the change. Instead, there was only the steady continuation of duty and the silent understanding of those entrusted with its execution. Across the widening span of the Imperium, the expeditionary fleets continued their advance. Their formation stretched across distances so vast that no single observer could perceive their entirety. Each fleet functioned as both an independent force and a component of a greater whole, bound together by common purpose and unwavering loyalty. The son of the Emperor stood at the center of this immense endeavor. From the command deck of his flagship, he oversaw movements that spanned entire sectors of space. Reports arrived in endless procession, carried across the void by astropathic transmission. Each message represented another world encountered, another civilization evaluated, another decision made in accordance with the Emperor's vision. He received them all in silence. He did not rush his judgments. He understood that each choice carried consequences that would extend far beyond the present moment. Around him, the structured command had grown more complex. Other great leaders had emerged, figures of immense capability and authority, each entrusted with guiding their own fleets into the unknown. They were beings of exceptional design, created as instruments of unity, their loyalty to the Emperor absolute. They were brothers in purpose. Together, they formed the foundation upon which the crusade advanced. Each carried a fragment of the Emperor's intent, expressed to their own strengths and perspectives. Some were contemplative, favoring patience and careful integration. Others were swift and decisive, bringing rapid compliance to worlds that resisted reunion. Though their methods differed, their purpose remained the same. Humanity would be made whole. The son of the Emperor did not see himself as their master, but as a first among equals, entrusted with maintaining the cohesion of their shared mission. He communicated with them regularly, his words measured and precise. He offered guidance where it was needed and trust where it had been earned. He did not seek to control every action. He sought to ensure unity of direction. This balance preserved the Crusade's momentum. World after world continued to enter compliance. Some required only the presence of the Imperium's fleets to recognize the inevitability of reunion. Others demanded prolonged negotiation, their leaders reluctant to relinquish authority that had been theirs for generations. In these moments, diplomacy was pursued with patience, but always with the understanding that unity could not be denied indefinitely. The Imperium did not abandon its purpose. Behind the advancing fleets came the instruments of permanence. Vast construction vessels arrived in orbit around compliant worlds, their mechanisms unfolding slowly as they began the process of integration. Orbital defenses were established. Communication networks were constructed. The presence of the Imperium became not merely symbolic, but structural. Each world was transformed into a stable component of a greater system. On Terra, the Emperor continued his work in silence. Though distant from the front lines, his influence remained absolute. His vision guided every aspect of the Imperium's development, from its military expansion to its administrative foundation. Those who served him understood that his absence from the Crusade's forefront did not signify withdrawal, but preparation. He was building something that would endure beyond conquest. His son felt that absence not as loss, but as expectation. He understood that the Emperor had entrusted him with the continuation of the Crusade because he had been created for that purpose. There was no uncertainty in this realization. It was a truth as fundamental as the stars themselves. He accepted it fully. In quiet moments, he reflected upon the scale of what had already been achieved. Humanity, once scattered and isolated, now existed within a growing network of unity. Worlds that had never known one another were now connected by shared allegiance. Knowledge that had been fragmented was being restored. Technologies long lost were being rediscovered. The Imperium was becoming more than a collection of worlds. It was becoming a civilization once again. Yet the galaxy remained vast. For every world brought into compliance, countless more awaited discovery. The Crusade's progress, though immense, represented only the beginning of a process that would require generations to complete. This understanding did not discourage him. It strengthened his resolve. He did not measure success by completion. He measured it by continuation. Among the warriors, his presence inspired unwavering confidence. They saw in him the living embodiment of the Emperor's trust. His leadership provided certainty in the face of the unknown. Where he stood, there was no doubt, only purpose. They followed him without hesitation. In the silent depth between the stars, his flagship moved at the head of the fleet, its course guided by calculations older than the Imperium itself. Around it, other vessels maintained precise formation, their engines burning with steady brilliance against the darkness. Inside those vessels, countless lives continued their ordered existence. Crew members performed their duties with quiet dedication. Officers studied their charts. Warriors prepared for the next compliance, their armor waiting in stillness. All of it moved in harmony. All of it moved toward the same distant future. And always, beyond the immediate concerns of campaign and command, there remained the Emperor's vision, vast and unchanging. Though he no longer walked beside the fleets as he once had, his presence endured in every action taken in his name. His son carried that presence forward. He did so without hesitation. He did so without rest. For he understood, as few others could, that the Imperium was not merely an empire. It was the preservation of humanity itself. And as the fleets continued their steady advance into silent and waiting dark, the shape of a new era emerged, defined not by uncertainty, but by unity and guided always by the distant, unwavering will of the Emperor. As the Imperium extended its reach deeper into galaxy, the nature command began to evolve. What had once been the guidance of a single, ever-present sovereign became instead a structure sustained by trust, delegation, and unshakable purpose. The Emperor remained the origin of all authority, but the execution of his will now rested increasingly in the hands of those he had shaped to carry it forward. At the center of this responsibility stood his first son. He had long since ceased to measure time in ordinary terms. Years passed as moments, and moments carried the significance of years. The Crusade's advance provided no clear divisions, no natural pauses. It was a continuous motion, a steady unfolding that demanded constant attention. He did not resist this burden. He accepted it as the natural state of his existence. Within the vast strategium of his flagship, the galaxy was displayed in silent detail. Countless stars shimmered across the projection field, each marked with symbols denoting progress, compliance, or pending contact. The image was never still. It shifted constantly as new information arrived, as new routes were charted, as new decisions were made. He studied it without distraction. Each star represented human lives. Each world represented a fragment of humanity's scattered past. His duty was to ensure they became part of its unified future. Around him, his officers worked in quiet efficiency. They spoke in measured tones, their voices carrying reports of fleet movements, resource allocations, and planetary assessments. There was no chaos, no urgency born of panic. Everything unfolded according to established order. This was the Imperium's strength. It did not depend upon improvisation. It depended upon certainty. Yet certainty required constant vigilance. The further the crusade advanced, the greater the distances between its fleets became. Communication delays grew longer. Decisions increasingly fell to individual commanders, each entrusted with interpreting the Emperor's vision within their own sphere of operation. This decentralization was not weakness. It was necessity. The son of the Emperor understood this well. He did not seek to control every action directly. He could not. Instead, he ensured that those who carried out the crusade did so with clarity of purpose. He maintained cohesion not through constant intervention, but through unwavering example. His presence alone provided alignment. When he spoke with his brothers, it was not to command, but to unify. Their conversations were conducted across impossible distances. Their words carried to the silent medium of astropathic transmission. Though separated by entire sectors, their shared origin ensured mutual understanding. They spoke of progress. They spoke of resistance. They spoke of the Imperium's future. Each brother bore the same essential responsibility, though expressed through different methods. Some brought worlds into compliance through patient diplomacy, offering integration with minimal disruption. Others achieved unity through swift and overwhelming demonstration of force, ensuring that resistance could not persist. Together, they formed a network of authority that extended across the stars. Each was essential. Each was irreplaceable. And yet, the first son remained distinct. He carried not only responsibility, but expectation. He did not resent this. He embraced it fully. Beyond the command chambers, the warriors of the Imperium prepared continuously for the next stage of the crusade. Their existence was defined by readiness. They required little rest. Their purpose sustained them. Within the arming halls, their armor was maintained with careful precision, each plate bearing the history of previous campaigns. They did not question their role. They existed to fulfill it. Among the mortal crew, life continued with quieter rhythms. They moved through the immense corridors of the vessel, attending to systems that sustained its operation. Generations were born, lived, and passed away within its walls, their lives intertwined with the Crusade's progress. They would never see Terra, yet they served it faithfully. In this way, the Imperium existed not as an abstraction, but as a living structure, sustained by countless individuals whose contributions, though small in isolation, formed an unbreakable whole. The son of the Emperor often walked among them without announcement. He observed their work, their discipline, their quiet devotion. He did not speak to them often. He did not need to. His presence alone affirmed their purpose. They saw in him the continuation of the Emperor's will. They saw in him the future of the Imperium. Still, there were moments when he withdrew into solitude from the observation deck. He would stand alone, gazing into the endless expanse beyond the vessel's armor hull. The stars shone with indifferent constancy, their light unchanged by the Imperium's expansion. They had witnessed humanity's rise and fall before. They would witness its future as well. He understood this perspective. The Imperium, vast though it was becoming, remained only a single presence within an infinite cosmos. Its survival depended upon unity. Its unity depended upon strength. And its strength depended upon those who carried the Emperor's vision forward without deviation. He did not allow himself doubt. Doubt served no purpose. The Emperor had foreseen this moment. He had known that the crusade would one day require others to carry it onward. He had prepared his son for this responsibility from the beginning. There was no uncertainty in that preparation, only continuation. As new reports arrived, the son of the Emperor turned once more to the shifting projection of the galaxy. Another world had been located. Another fragment of humanity awaited reunion. Its star glowed faintly at the edge of explored space, distant and alone, not for much longer. He issued the necessary orders. The fleet adjusted its course. Far ahead, beyond the reach of present sight, the next chapter of the Imperium's expansion awaited its arrival. And in the silent void between the stars, guided by unwavering purpose and the enduring vision of the Emperor, the Crusade continued its endless advance, carrying humanity forward into the vast and waiting future. There came a time during the Great Crusade when the Imperium began to feel less like an expanding frontier and more like a unified whole. This transformation did not occur in a single moment. It revealed itself gradually, through countless acts of connection that bound distant worlds into shared existence. Where once there had been isolation measured in centuries, there was now communication measured in days. Where once there had been uncertainty, there was now structure. The Imperium had begun to overcome distance itself. Astropathic choirs, trained to project thought across the immaterial depths, formed the invisible network that held the Imperium together. Through their effort, messages traveled between stars, carrying orders, reports, and confirmations of compliance. These transmissions were not instantaneous, nor were they without strain, but they allowed humanity to function as something greater than scattered fragments. They allowed humanity to act as one. The son of the Emperor relied upon this network constantly. From the command throne of his flagship, he received the thoughts of distant fleets and commanders. Their words arrived not as sound, but as impressions shaped into meaning by the minds of those trained to interpret them. Each message added to the growing clarity of the Imperium's shape. Entire sectors now existed within its authority. Regions once separated by the long darkness of old night had been restored to mutual awareness. Trade routes were established. Knowledge was shared. The isolated evolution of humanity's lost branches was slowly replaced by reintegration into a single, unified civilization. This process was not merely military. It was civilizational. On compliant worlds, the changes were profound. New governance structures aligned planetary leadership with imperial authority. Local traditions were preserved where possible, integrated into the greater framework rather than erased. The Imperium did not seek uniformity of culture. It sought uniformity of allegiance. This distinction preserved stability. It allowed humanity to remain diverse while remaining united. Across thousands of worlds, billions of individuals lived beneath skies that now belonged to the same Imperium. Most would never see Terra. Most would never stand in the presence of the Emperor or his sons. Yet they understood their place within the greater whole. They were no longer alone. For the warriors of the Crusade, this growing unity provided confirmation of their purpose. Each compliance reinforced the certainty that their actions were building something permanent. They did not see themselves as conquerors. They saw themselves as restorers, returning humanity to its rightful state. Their discipline did not waver. Their faith in the Emperor's vision did not diminish. Among the commanders of the Crusade, cooperation deepened. The Emperor's sons, spread across immense distances, coordinated their efforts with increasing precision. Their fleets operated not as isolated forces, but as components of a greater design. When one encountered resistance beyond its capacity, others adjusted their course to provide support. When one achieved compliance in a strategically significant region, others reinforced its integration. This cooperation ensured that no part of the Imperium remained vulnerable. The son of the Emperor oversaw this coordination with constant attention. He did not impose unnecessary control, but he ensured that unity remained absolute. His communications carried both authority and understanding. His brothers recognized in him the reflection of the Emperor's original intent. They trusted him. He justified that trust through unwavering consistency. Yet even as unity strengthened, the Imperium did not slow its expansion. The galaxy remained vast beyond comprehension. For every region brought into compliance, countless more awaited discovery. The Crusade remained as necessary as ever. From the observation decks of his flagship, the son of the Emperor watched as newly constructed vessels joined the fleet. These ships represented the Imperium's growing strength. Their arrival marked a transition from fragile expansion to sustained permanence. The Imperium was no longer dependent upon a single point of origin. It had become self-sustaining. Shipyards orbiting distant stars now produce vessels equal to those constructed above Terra. Forge worlds dedicated their entire existence to production of weapons, armor, and engines. Each new addition reinforced the Imperium's ability to continue its mission without interruption. This independence was essential. It ensured that the Crusade would endure regardless of distance. Still, the Emperor's absence remained a constant presence of its own. His son did not question it. He understood that the Emperor's work upon Terra was vital to the Imperium's ultimate future. The Crusade was only one part of a greater design. That design extended beyond immediate comprehension. And so, he continued without hesitation. He moved among his warriors, his officers, and his crew, ensuring that the Imperium's unity remained not only structural, but spiritual. His presence reminded them that they were part of something that transcended individual existence. They did not serve merely for victory. They served for continuity. In quiet moments, he reflected upon the enormity of what had been achieved. Humanity, once scattered and vulnerable, now existed as a single entity stretching across the stars. Its survival was no longer uncertain. Its future was no longer fragmented. It had become whole. Yet he understood that wholeness required constant preservation. Unity, once achieved, must be maintained. From the command deck, he issued new orders. The fleet adjusted its trajectory once more, turning toward another distant system, whose star burned faintly at the edge of Imperial knowledge. Within that system waited another fragment of humanity's long isolation. Soon, it would be alone no longer. The engines of the fleet ignited with steady brilliance, carrying the Imperium forward into the silent depths. Around them, the galaxy remained vast and patient, its ancient stars watching without judgment. And within that endless expanse, the Imperium advanced without pause, its unity overcoming distance, its purpose overcoming time, its future carried forward by the unbroken will of the Emperor and the unwavering devotion of those who served him. As the Imperium expanded ever outward, its center grew quieter. Terra remained the heart of humanity, the origin from which the Great Crusade had begun, yet its role had begun to change. Where once it had been the launching point of fleets and the seat of constant strategic command, it now existed in a state of profound and deliberate stillness. Its function had not diminished. It had deepened. From across the galaxy, Terra appeared unchanged. Its orbital defenses remained vigilant. Its shipyards continued their tireless labor. Its surface, long shaped by the passage of countless ages, endured as it always had. But beneath that familiar exterior, the Emperor's attention had turned inward, toward work that few would ever see, and fewer still would understand. He no longer walked at the forefront of compliance. He no longer stood upon the bridges of expeditionary vessels, gazing out at the unknown. He remained upon Terra. This absence was not a withdrawal. It was a concentration. Those who served closest to him observed the change without question. They continued their duties with the same devotion that had always defined them. The guardians who stood watch over his person did so without distraction. The artisans, engineers, and scholars who labored within the vast structures beneath Terra's surface pursued their tasks in silence. All understood that what was being built was essential. Though its nature remained beyond their full comprehension, its importance was unquestioned. Across the galaxy, the Emperor's son felt the weight of that silence. From the command deck of his flagship, he often turned his thoughts toward Terra, though it lay impossibly distant. He did not require communication to feel its presence. It remained constant, the fixed point around which all else moved. He understood that the Emperor's work that would shape the Imperium's ultimate destiny. This knowledge did not diminish his own responsibility. It strengthened it. The Crusade could not slow. It could not pause. Every moment of continued expansion reinforced the foundation the Emperor was preparing. Every world brought into compliance added stability to the Imperium's growing structure. The fleets moved forward without hesitation. New regions of space came into view, their stars burning with quiet indifference. Within those systems, human civilizations waited in isolation, unaware that their separation was nearing its end. Some had preserved fragments of ancient knowledge. Others had regressed into simpler forms of existence. All represented pieces of humanity's scattered legacy. Each would be reclaimed. Each would be restored. The son of the Emperor carried out this mission with unwavering focus. He did not allow himself distraction. He did not question the Emperor's absence. He understood that trust flowed in both directions. Just as he trusted the Emperor's vision, the Emperor trusted him to carry that vision forward. This trust was absolute. Among his brothers, the same understanding prevailed. They continued their own campaigns across distant sectors, each advancing the Imperium's reach. Their communications remained steady, their coordination precise. Though separated by unimaginable distances, their shared purpose bound them together. They did not act alone. They acted as extensions of a single will. On compliant worlds, the Imperium's presence became increasingly permanent. Great fortifications rose above planetary capitals. Orbital platforms guarded vital trade routes. The infrastructure unity spread steadily, transforming isolated civilizations into integrated components of the Imperium's vast network. The people of those worlds adapted to their new reality. For many, the Imperium's arrival brought stability unknown for generations. Long-standing conflicts ended beneath its authority. Knowledge once lost was restored. Contact with other human worlds expanded their understanding of existence beyond the confines of their own skies. They became part of something enduring. Yet terror remained distant, its silence unbroken. Within its hidden chambers, the Emperor continued his work. Those few who glimpsed him during this time saw no sign of hesitation. His focus remained absolute. His purpose remained unchanged. He had not abandoned the crusade. He had moved beyond its immediate execution to ensure its ultimate success. He was building permanence. The son of the Emperor understood this more clearly with each passing year. The Imperium was no longer a fragile creation. It had grown into a structure capable of sustaining itself. Its expansion continued not through dependence, but through established momentum. Still, that momentum required guidance. From his position at the forefront of the crusade, he provided it without hesitation. He reviewed reports, issued orders, and maintained a unity that defined the Imperium's strength. His presence reassured those who served beneath him. They saw in him the living continuation of the Emperor's authority. They followed him without doubt. In quiet moments, he reflected upon the Emperor's last direct presence beside him. He remembered the certainty in his father's voice, the clarity of his purpose. There had been no ambiguity in his departure for Terra. There had been only necessity. That necessity now defined everything. The crusade advanced through the silent void, its fleets carrying humanity's future into regions untouched for millennia. Each new system entered into compliance strengthened the Imperium's foundation. Each reunited world reduced the galaxy's vast isolation. And always, at the center of it all, Terra remained, silent, unmoving, enduring. From the observation deck, the son of the Emperor gazed into the endless expanse, aware that somewhere beyond perception, the Emperor continued his unseen labor. He did not feel distance. He felt continuity. The Imperium was no longer defined by proximity. It was defined by purpose. And as the fleets carried that purpose forward into the infinite darkness, Terra remained the still heart of humanity, its silence not empty, but filled with the promise of a future yet to fully unfold. The Imperium's expansion continued with a measured inevitability that had become its defining rhythm. Each system brought under its authority was not simply another conquest, but a restoration of humanity's long-fractured network. Planets that had drifted in isolation for millennia now began to align with a central order that extended across the galaxy. Civilization, once scattered, was slowly being reassembled into a coherent whole. The son of the Emperor observed this progress constantly. From his flagship, he studied the intricate web of fleets, administrators, and armies that moved in deliberate coordination. Each fleet acted as both an independent force and a component of a vast system. Their operations were planned to achieve compliance with minimal disruption, yet the potential for resistance was always accounted for. No corner of human space would be left unchecked. Reports arrived continually, carried by astropathic transmission through the Imperium's invisible network. Some reports described worlds that had accepted the Imperium's arrival with relief, recognizing the return of authority and unity. Others spoke of resistance, often stubborn and prolonged, where local rulers clung to power earned through isolation. The son of the Emperor treated each report with the same calm deliberation, understanding that the Imperium's permanence depended not on the immediacy of victory, but on its enduring integration. When resistance arose, it was met with precision. The warriors of the Imperium descended as instruments of inevitability, their arrival swift and absolute. Cities that had stood untouched for centuries were brought under control, their defenses neutralized with minimal unnecessary destruction. It was not terror that the Imperium wielded, but certainty. Its presence was a weight that no isolated civilization could bear against indefinitely. Yet, even in these moments of conflict, there was no triumph. The Imperium did not celebrate conquest for its own sake. Every action served the greater design. Every compliance reinforced the structure being woven across the galaxy. The son of the Emperor maintained perspective. He understood that the purpose of the crusade extended beyond immediate victories. It was a work of integration, the slow assembly of humanity's scattered remnants into a single, enduring civilization. The fleets moved outward in unbroken lines. Their engines burned steadily, propelling thousands of vessels through systems that had not known contact for countless generations. Trade, communication, and observation networks followed in their wake, establishing frameworks that would sustain the Imperium long after the initial compliance of a world. Administrators arrived to record histories, assess resources, and implement governance structures. Scholars cataloged knowledge that had been fragmented, restoring lost understanding wherever possible. Every action reinforced unity. The son of the Emperor was not only a commander, but a symbol. His presence, when glimpsed by mortal observers, inspired obedience not through fear alone, but through recognition of purpose. He embodied the authority of Terra, the continuity of the Emperor's vision, and the certainty of the Imperium's inevitability. Those who served alongside him trusted in his judgment. Those who received his orders accepted them without question. The scale of his responsibility was immense. Entire sectors depended upon his decisions. Worlds were shaped, lives were reorganized, and civilizations were guided toward integration by the clarity of his intent. Yet, he carried it without hesitation. He understood that the weight of command was not a burden to be resented, but a duty to be fulfilled with absolute precision. Even as the crusade advanced, the galaxy's vastness reminded him of the work yet to be done. For every system brought into compliance, countless more awaited discovery. Stars shone beyond the limits of current observation, their worlds uncharted, their civilizations unknown. The son of the Emperor viewed these distances not as obstacles, but as the inevitable continuation of a mission that had already begun and could not be stopped. The Imperium's expansion was gradual, deliberate, and unrelenting. Each new region incorporated into its structure added to its strength, but also to its complexity. The coordination of fleets, administrators, and warriors required constant vigilance. Communication across immense distances, though aided by astropads, was never instantaneous. Commanders at the edges of explored space were empowered to act independently, yet always within the framework of the Emperor's vision transmitted through his son. Through this system, the Imperium grew both outward and inward. Compliance was reinforced not only through presence, but through integration. Resources were pooled, knowledge was centralized, and the bond between distant worlds became tangible. Humanity, once fragmented and isolated, now moved as a single organism, guided by purpose and unified by vision. And yet, the son of the Emperor never allowed complacency. He knew that unity was not a state, but a process. Compliance achieved in one sector required reinforcement in another. The Crusade's momentum could not falter. Every decision, every action, every fleet's movement was calculated to ensure that the Imperium's reach would continue to expand, uninterrupted by distance, time, or resistance. At night, in the quiet hours between transmissions, he would sometimes stand alone upon the observation deck, gazing at the stars. The galaxy's vastness pressed against perception, yet within that vastness, he saw the shape of unity. Each point of light represented potential, history, and connection. Each world, whether compliant or yet to be reached, was part of the design unfolding across centuries and millennia. He felt no doubt, only responsibility. And beyond immediate comprehension, he knew the Emperor's presence endured at the heart of Terra. Though unseen, that presence guided all that was accomplished and all that remained to be done. The crusade was not merely a military campaign. It was the reconstruction of humanity, the assembly of an enduring civilization from fragments scattered by the darkness of ages past. The fleets pressed onward. Worlds entered compliance. Structures were established. Knowledge was restored. The Imperium's light spread across the void, slow, steady, and unstoppable. And in the silent corridors of his flagship, the son of the Emperor prepared for the next step, knowing that every action taken now carried forward not only the Imperium's expansion, but the certainty of its permanence. The galaxy was vast. Its challenges were many, but humanity's return to unity, guided by purpose and preserved by vigilance, would continue without pause, reaching ever outward into the infinite darkness. The Imperium had grown beyond what even the most careful observers of the early Crusade could have imagined. Entire sectors had been charted, mapped, and brought into compliance, each contributing to the unbroken web of humanity's return. Yet the galaxy remained vast, silent, and unknowable beyond the limits of present exploration. For every world united, countless others remained in isolation, their histories untouched, their civilizations uncounted. The son of the Emperor observed this endless expanse from the bridge of his flagship. The stars stretched outward in every direction, their distant light unchanged by the presence of human fleets. They bore witness to crusade, indifferent yet eternal. Each point of brightness represented a world, and each world represented human lives, slowly drawn into the Imperium's expanding fold. He did not see them as obstacles or as mere targets of conquest. He saw them as fragments of a greater whole, each with a place within the structure the Emperor had begun to rebuild. Compliance was not subjugation. It was restoration, the careful reunification of what had been scattered across millennia. The fleets moved with silent precision, their engines leaving faint trails of brilliance against the void. Each vessel carried not only warriors and administrators, but the tools of integration, machines, scholars, and technologies designed to transform isolation into cohesion. Every action reinforced the Imperium's permanence. Every movement strengthened its structure. Reports arrived continuously, transmitted across immense distances by astropathic choirs trained to project thought and meaning. Some described worlds that had embraced the Imperium with quiet relief. Others described resistance, stubborn, prolonged, requiring measured response. In each case, the son of the Emperor met the challenges with the same unwavering calm that had defined him for decades. He did not react with haste. He did not act impulsively. His decisions were deliberate, weighed against the long arc of the Crusade's purpose. Victory was not measured by speed, but by integration. The Imperium's permanence depended upon each new world being fully restored into its structure, not merely observed or controlled. The warriors who served under him embodied this principle. They descended upon resistant worlds with measured efficiency, their arrival decisive yet restrained. Cities and fortresses fell not because of cruelty, but because resistance could not persist indefinitely against certainty. And when the fighting ended, the Imperium did not abandon the conquered. Administrators arrived, scholars recorded knowledge, and systems were integrated into the broader network. Even the smallest details mattered. The son of the Emperor understood that the survival of the Imperium depended upon precision at every level, from fleet movement to planetary administration. He did not allow complacency to take root. Every report, every observation, every decision reinforced the framework of unity. Beyond the fleets, Terra remained the silent center of the Imperium. Its surface, its shipyards, and its hidden chambers were unchanged in outward appearance. Yet the Emperor's presence was an active force, shaping events and destinies unseen. The son of the Emperor did not require constant contact to understand this. Terra's stillness was not absence, but focus. It radiated certainty through the Imperium, guiding every movement across the galaxy. Even so, the Crusade's momentum depended upon him. He carried authority in place of presence, ensuring that the Emperor's vision continued without interruption. He coordinated fleets spanning entire sectors, directed administrators and scholars, and oversaw the integration of new worlds. His voice carried across space through astropathic channels, uniting commanders in distant systems into a single, coherent will. The galaxy's vastness demanded patience. Travel between systems took months, sometimes years. Communications required careful interpretation. Decisions made in isolation could not be reckless. Yet the son of the emperor never faltered. He understood that distance did not weaken authority. It demanded disciplined foresight and consistency. On compliant worlds, life began to transform under imperial guidance. New structures rose in capitals, orbital platforms monitored trade and defense, and knowledge once forgotten was restored. Humanity began to function as an interconnected network, drawing strength from its unity. Even civilizations that had resisted initially were gradually integrated, their histories recorded, and their contributions absorbed into the Imperium's growing legacy. In the quiet moments between reports, the son of the emperor would reflect upon the scale of what had been accomplished. Isolation was retreating. Humanity, once fractured, was becoming coherent. Compliance was no longer fragile. Unity was no longer tentative. The crusade was moving inexorably forward, carrying with it the promise of permanence. Yet he remained vigilant. He understood that continuity required more than expansion. It required oversight, patience, and the careful balancing of autonomy and control. Command was not merely about conquest. It was about ensuring that every part of the Imperium could function as part of a greater whole. The stars, indifferent in their eternal drift, offered no guidance beyond the evidence of distance and time. But within that expanse, the Imperium pressed forward, disciplined and deliberate. Its fleets, its warriors, and its administrators were the living embodiment of the Emperor's will. Each act of compliance, each integration, each restored civilization added to the unbroken fabric that stretched ever outward. And always at the center of all this motion lay Terra. Silent, eternal, unyielding, it remained a source of authority and purpose. The Emperor continued his unseen work there, shaping the Imperium's ultimate destiny, while his son carried forward the visible reality of unity across the stars. The crusade had no end, only direction. Its movement was measured, deliberate, and unstoppable. Across the silent void, the Imperium extended its reach, drawing humanity closer together, integrating the scattered fragments of its existence, and creating a civilization capable of enduring across the uncounted millennia. And in the endless black between the stars, where light traveled silently and time itself seemed to slow, the son of the Emperor watched, guided, and acted, knowing that the future humanity depended upon continuity, purpose, and the unbroken will of the Emperor, reaching ever outward into the horizon of eternity. As the Great Crusade progressed, its nature began to shift from the simple movement of fleets into distant systems to the deeper, subtler work of establishing permanence. The Imperium had become more than the sum of its vessels and warriors. It was now a living structure, sustained by the coordinated efforts of countless individuals and the unbroken will of the Emperor. The reach of its authority extended into every corner of compliant space, shaping the lives of billions even in the absence of immediate oversight. The son of the Emperor, ever vigilant, understood that the visible expansion of fleets was only one measure of the Imperium's strength. Equally vital was the unseen network that bound planets together, the systems of communication, governance, and knowledge that ensured unity persisted beyond the presence of any single fleet or commander. These frameworks were not passive. They required maintenance, adjustment, and careful calibration. Even the smallest oversight could ripple outward across sectors, creating instability where none had existed before. From his flagship, he reviewed reports from worlds recently brought into compliance. Some described civilizations that had immediately accepted the Imperium's authority, adapting their institutions and practices to align with the larger structure. Others recounted societies that had resisted, struggling to preserve autonomy despite overwhelming evidence of futility. These latter cases required not just military action, but patience and precise management, the application of authority with both firmness and restraint. He did not hesitate in response to resistance, nor did he act rashly. His decisions were guided by the Emperor's vision, a lens through which all events could be measured. Conquest alone was insufficient. True permanence required integration, the transformation of isolated societies into functioning components of a broader whole, capable of sustaining themselves and reinforcing the Imperium's stability. The fleets carried administrators, engineers, and scholars who embodied this principle. Upon arrival, they began the meticulous work of assessment and reorganization. Records were reconstructed, local governance aligned with imperial structures, and technology restored wherever possible. Each action was deliberate, measured, and designed to ensure continuity beyond the immediate presence of the Crusade. Every compliant world became a permanent addition, not merely a conquered territory. The son of the Emperor observed these processes with quiet attentiveness. He understood the importance of precision in every detail. The integration of a single planet could influence entire sectors, its stability affecting neighboring systems and reinforcing the overall cohesion of the Imperium. Authority was not merely asserted. It was maintained, reinforced, and sustained. Across the vast reaches of the galaxy, coordination among the Emperor's sons had become increasingly sophisticated. Independent fleets operated with remarkable autonomy, yet all aligned with the overarching design. Astropathic communication ensured that the will of Terra could be felt even in the most remote regions, a guiding presence that shaped decisions long before fleets arrived. Commanders trusted one another, confident that their actions supported a singular, coherent objective. Even in the midst of expansion, vigilance remained essential. The son of the Emperor could not afford distraction. He monitored distant sectors, anticipating where support might be needed, where compliance might falter, or where local instability could threaten broader unity. His awareness was both detailed and expansive, encompassing countless systems and billions of lives. He carried responsibility that would have overwhelmed any ordinary individual, yet he bore it with unwavering calm. In moments of solitude, he would stand upon the observation deck, gazing into the endless void. The stars, innumerable and eternal, reflected the immensity of the task. Each point of light represented potential, history, and connection, worlds yet to be reunited, civilizations yet to be restored. The galaxy was indifferent, yet within its vast silence, he found clarity. He understood that the Imperium's progress was inevitable, but that inevitability required constant attention to sustain it. Terra, distant yet central, remained the focal point of all authority. The Emperor continued his unseen labor, shaping the foundations that would endure far beyond the immediate reach of the Crusade. The son of the Emperor knew that his father's absence from the front lines was not neglect, but trust. Trust that the Crusade could be guided, that humanity could be unified, and that the Imperium could be made permanent through diligent oversight and coordinated action. The fleets moved steadily forward, leaving behind stabilized worlds and entering sectors where humanity had yet to feel the weight of imperial presence. The son of the Emperor directed these movements with deliberate foresight, ensuring that no world remained isolated, no civilization forgotten, and no opportunity for disruption left unaddressed. The scale of this coordination was immense, but he approached it not with urgency, but with measured purpose. In the quiet corridors of his flagship, he walked among those who carried out his orders. Warriors prepared for compliance operations, administrators studied planetary records, and engineers monitored the integrity of starship systems. Each contributed to broader design, their labor forming the structure that allowed the Imperium to exist as more than a military enterprise. They were part of something eternal, a civilization brought together across uncountable distances. Every action, every decision, every movement reinforced unity. The son of the Emperor understood that the Imperium's permanence depended not on displays of power alone, but on the meticulous, ongoing work of integration. The Crusade was not merely a campaign. It was the reconstruction of humanity itself, the assembly of isolated fragments into a coherent, unbroken whole. And as the fleets pressed onward into the uncharted expanse, carrying worlds in compliance and establishing networks of enduring stability, he remained vigilant. He carried forward not only the Emperor's authority, but the certainty that unity, once achieved, must be preserved. The Imperium moved as one, inexorable and deliberate, guided by purpose, sustained by careful stewardship, and shaped by the ever-present hand of its unseen sovereign at Terra. In the silence between stars, amidst the ceaseless motion of countless vessels, the Crusade continued. It advanced not for conquest alone, but for the enduring reunification of humanity, the restoration of lost worlds, and the creation of civilization capable of withstanding the unyielding expanse of eternity. The Great Crusade moved forward with the rhythm of inevitability. Every fleet in motion, every world brought into compliance, every administrative system established across newly integrated planets contributed to the steady, measured unfolding of the Emperor's vision. The Imperium no longer relied solely on fleets or warriors. It had become a living network, sustained through organization, discipline, and the unbroken continuity of command. The son of the Emperor oversaw this network with precision. From the bridge of his flagship, he observed vast projections of star systems, each one color-coded to indicate status. Worlds already aligned, those in provisional compliance, and those yet untouched by Imperial presence. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, vast, complex, and unyielding. Each point of light represented a civilization, a history, a people whose integration would strengthen the Imperium's permanence. Reports flowed continuously, transmitted through astropathic channels across immeasurable distances. Some described planets that had embraced Imperial rule with quiet acceptance, their populations cooperating fully in reconstruction and integration. Others reported lingering resistance, isolated but persistent, requiring careful attention to ensure that rebellion could not disrupt surrounding systems. The son of the Emperor considered each report in turn, weighing decisions not by immediacy, but by their long-term impact on the structure unity. Compliance was never hurried. Each world required measured integration. The Imperium sought not only submission but coherence, political, cultural, and structural. Administrators and scholars accompanied every fleet, tasked with reconstructing lost records, restoring broken systems, and guiding populations toward functionality within the broader network. Warriors provided security, but the true purpose was permanence. Every world had to become part of the Imperium in body, mind, and institution. Even the smallest details were significant. Infrastructure, trade, governance, and communication were as vital as the fleets themselves. A single mismanaged system could weaken regional cohesion, allowing instability to spread. The son of the Emperor ensured that vigilance extended to every corner of occupied space. He coordinated commanders, delegated authority, and monitored execution with the calm attention of one who had been trained for this precise role since birth. Beyond the fleets, Terra remained the unbroken center of authority. The Emperor's work there was unseen yet omnipresent. His presence radiated outward, shaping events across the galaxy through the structures and individuals he had prepared. The son of the Emperor understood this deeply. Terra's silence was not absence. It was focus, its authority transmitted indirectly yet comprehensively. The Crusade's expansion depended upon it, just as much as it depended upon his own command. Newly compliant worlds began to contribute in tangible ways. Shipyards in orbit produced vessels that reinforced fleet strength. Forge worlds supplied weapons, armor, and engines with tireless consistency. Knowledge restored on recovered planets informed strategies for integration elsewhere. The galaxy's vastness was gradually filled with the instruments of permanence. Each edition reinforced the interconnectedness of the Imperium, turning distant points of light into a cohesive network of human civilization. Even in sectors where resistance had been strongest, compliance was achieved with minimal destruction. The son of the Emperor understood that survival required more than victory in battle. Stability demanded careful management, attention to local systems, and the thoughtful application of authority. His decisions ensured that once conquered, a world remained integrated, capable of sustaining itself, and contributing to the broader Imperium. The fleets moved as extensions of a single purpose. Coordination between commanders was seamless. Independent decisions were guided by shared principles and the enduring framework established by the Emperor. Distances that would have seemed insurmountable centuries before were now bridged by astropathic communication, disciplined structure, and the certainty of command. Autonomy existed, but only within the bounds of single, coherent vision. Even as expansion continued, the son of the Emperor did not falter. He maintained constant awareness of both the immediate situation and the distant consequences of every action. Fleet formations, planetary integration, resource distribution, and civil reconstruction were all considered together as components of a larger system that required unbroken attention. Mistakes were rare, but vigilance never ceased. In moments of quiet, he would observe the stars from the bridge, noting distant suns that had yet to witness Imperial arrival. Each world was a potential addition, each civilization a future thread in the fabric of unity. The galaxy's silence was immense, yet he felt the Emperor's presence even in its emptiness, guiding, observing, and ensuring that the Crusade's purpose would endure. The Imperium had become more than conquest. It had become civilization itself. Every action, every fleet, every reconstructed system reinforced this fact. Humanity, once fractured and isolated, now moved as a coherent whole, capable of sustaining itself across the vast emptiness of space. The Crusade's momentum was unbroken, its advance deliberate and unstoppable. And as the stars stretched endlessly before him, the son of the Emperor continued his work. He coordinated fleets, oversaw integration, and maintained unity across thousands of worlds. He understood that every world brought into compliance, every system stabilized, and every civilization restored was part of a greater structure, one that would endure long after the light of individual suns faded. The horizon of eternity spread before him, vast, silent, and infinite. And within that horizon, the Imperium advanced, steady and unyielding, carrying humanity forward under the guidance of the Emperor's vision and the careful, unwavering hand of his first son. The Great Crusade advanced without pause, stretching humanity's influence across the galaxy like a vast, deliberate tide. Each star system brought into compliance added to the Imperium's coherence, yet the scope of what remained untouched reminded all who observed it that the task was far from complete. For every world reunited, countless others lay beyond the reach of even the most distant fleet, their histories isolated, their people unknowing of the order that waited to embrace them. The son of the Emperor carried the responsibility for coordinating this immense undertaking. From the bridge of his flagship, he observed star systems and fleet movements across uncountable distances, each decision affecting countless lives in distant worlds. Reports arrived continuously through the astropathic network, their weight immense yet necessary, for the maintenance of unity demanded constant attention. Every delay, every overlooked detail, could ripple across sectors, weakening cohesion where strength had only begun to take root. He did not hesitate. Each report, whether of acceptance or resistance, was considered with deliberate care. Worlds that embraced the Imperium were integrated with efficiency, their administration aligned, their knowledge recorded, and their resources incorporated into the greater structure. Resistance, though rarer than it had been in earlier campaigns, required careful management. Warriors and administrators alike acted with measured precision, ensuring that opposition was neutralized without unnecessary destruction, and that newly integrated systems became permanent contributors rather than transient additions. The fleets themselves were more than instruments of warfare. They were the agent of connection, carrying scholars, engineers, and diplomats alongside warriors. Each vessel represented a node in a network of human civilization, capable of reinforcing unity, restoring knowledge, and stabilizing entire sectors. As they moved through uncharted space, they turned isolation into coherence, creating structures that would endure for generations. Even the smallest worlds mattered. The son of the Emperor understood that a single mismanaged system could threaten regional stability. Authority had to be absolute, yet exercised with foresight. The Imperium's permanence depended on precision, on attention to both the immediate and the distant. No decision was too small to warrant careful consideration, for the galaxy scale magnified every error, and the lives of billions were at stake in even the quietest corners of space. Coordination among the Emperor's sons had become increasingly sophisticated. Independent fleets acted in accordance with overarching principles, yet all maintained alignment with the central design. Autonomy existed, but only within the bounds of purpose and unity. Astropathic communication allowed instructions to travel across light years, ensuring that even the most remote commanders operated with clarity of intent. Their decisions were guided not only by immediate circumstances, but by the long-term vision of integration that had defined the Crusade from its inception. In the moments between action, the son of the Emperor often reflected on the immensity of his responsibility. The galaxy's vastness was daunting, yet he did not measure the Imperium's success in conquest alone. Its true strength lay in permanence, in the ability of newly compliant worlds to sustain themselves, to contribute to collective network, and to reinforce the unity that defined humanity once again. On worlds recently brought into compliance, life began to stabilize. Cities reconstructed, governance reoriented, and resources redirected in ways that ensured both local functionality and contribution to the Imperium at large. Scholars cataloged histories, repaired broken records, and preserved culture where possible. Administrators aligned civil systems with overarching imperial structures, creating continuity that reached beyond the presence of fleet commanders. The son of the Emperor understood the significance of these subtle persistent efforts. While the fleets demonstrated the Imperium's strength through presence and action, it was a meticulous, often unseen work of integration that guaranteed its survival. Each successful integration reduced the risk of rebellion, strengthened regional cohesion, and reinforced the Imperium's enduring structure. And yet, the galaxy remained vast and uncharted. For every system integrated, countless more awaited discovery. The Crusade's expansion was inexorable, yet tempered by awareness of both distance and consequence. Every movement had to be deliberate, every fleet's course calculated, every decision considered within the wider context of unity and permanence. Even as he monitored distant fleets and worlds, the son of the Emperor felt the silent presence of terror. Though far removed from the front lines, the Emperor's work continued unseen, shaping the foundations of civilization capable of sustaining itself long beyond the initial wave of expansion. His father's absence was not neglect, but trust, and that trust defined the manner in which the crusade was executed. The fleets pressed on, carrying both warriors and instruments of integration. Stars passed silently outside observation ports, distant suns indifferent to the labors below. Yet within the Imperium, every action resonated. Civilization expanded, knowledge restored, and humanity was drawn into a single, unbroken structure. The son of the Emperor walked the corridors of his flagship, observing the quiet rhythm of preparation. Warriors maintained readiness, administrators studied records, and engineers ensured the vessels operated flawlessly. Each individual contributed to the whole, reinforcing the unbroken network that allowed the Imperium to endure beyond immediate necessity. He did not see himself as conqueror or ruler in the ordinary sense. His role was far greater. He was the guarantor of unity, the steward of permanence, and a living continuation of the Emperor's will. Every fleet coordinated, every planet integrated, and every resistance subdued was an act of restoration rather than domination. And as the silent expanse of the galaxy stretched endlessly outward, he contemplated the immensity of what had been accomplished and what remained. The crusade was far from complete, yet the Imperium's advance was unstoppable. Humanity, once scattered across isolated stars, was becoming whole again, bound together by purpose, by discipline, and by the unbroken hand of the Emperor carried forward by his son. The stars shone as witnesses, silent and eternal, while the fleets pressed ever onward. And in that vast, patient darkness, the son of the Emperor continued his work, guided by unwavering purpose, sustained by the certainty of the Emperor's vision, and carrying humanity forward toward unity that would endure across the uncountable centuries of the future. The galaxy stretched endlessly, vast and indifferent, yet within that silent expanse, humanity's presence began to assert itself with precision and permanence. The Great Crusade had transformed from a campaign of movement and compliance into an intricate operation of integration, coordination, and restoration. No longer merely an expansion of territory, it had become the deliberate assembly of civilization, uniting fractured worlds into a single, enduring network. From a bridge of his flagship, the son of the Emperor observed this process unfold across light years. Stars shimmered beyond the observation ports, each system representing a potential addition to the Imperium. Some were already compliant, their populations organized and infrastructure aligned with imperial standards. Others were newly contacted, requiring careful guidance to integrate their institutions, knowledge, and resources. Each world was treated not as a prize, but as a vital thread in the broader fabric of unity. Reports arrived continuously through the astropathic network, their transmission steady, reliable, and precise. They described planetary conditions, fleet positions, resource assessments, and, when necessary, resistance encountered. Some worlds accepted imperial authority with quiet compliance, their people adapting naturally to the structures imposed for cohesion. Others resisted, testing the limits of patience and discipline, requiring measured intervention to ensure that rebellion did not spread or destabilize surrounding sectors. The son of the Emperor approached each situation with calm deliberation. He understood that true permanence required more than conquest. It demanded careful restoration and integration. Warriors secured order, administrators aligned governance, and scholars reconstructed lost histories. Each world added to the Imperium's coherence, reinforcing networks that connected distant sectors into a single, functioning whole. The fleets themselves had evolved into instruments of coordination as much as instruments of war. Ships carried not only soldiers but experts in governance, engineering, and record-keeping. Each fleet was a node in an interstellar network, capable of enforcing authority, transmitting knowledge, and stabilizing civilizations across vast distances. The Son of the Emperor maintained continuous oversight, ensuring that each vessel's movement and each commander's action contributed to the overarching structure unity. Even the smallest details were critical. Infrastructure, trade, communication, and civic systems all required careful calibration. A single mismanaged world could create instability, weakening regional cohesion and introducing vulnerabilities. The Son of the Emperor monitored these systems continuously, balancing autonomy with centralized guidance, ensuring that every sector functioned both independently and as part of the whole. Coordination among the Emperor's sons remained essential. Independent fleets operated autonomously, yet their actions adhered to a shared vision transmitted to the Emperor's will. Astropathic communications allowed decisions to align over distances that would otherwise have rendered synchronization impossible. Trust among commanders was absolute, yet constantly reinforced by shared objectives, experience, and the certainty of imperial oversight. Even as compliance spread, vigilance remained imperative. The galaxy's vastness permitted no complacency. New systems appeared at the edge of known space, untouched for centuries, their populations isolated, their civilizations developed independently. Each discovery required thoughtful assessment, the determination of needs, the restoration of knowledge, and the alignment of governance structures. Integration was as much about understanding as it was about enforcement. On worlds recently brought into the Imperium, life began to stabilize under careful supervision. Administrative systems were aligned with imperial standards, trade routes secured, and civic infrastructure repaired or replaced where necessary. Knowledge long lost to isolation was restored and cataloged. Scholars and artisans worked alongside warriors and administrators, creating a balanced environment in which both authority and culture could endure. The Son of the Emperor understood the significance of these efforts. While military presence ensured immediate compliance, it was a quiet, consistent work of integration that guaranteed permanence. Stability, continuity, and the unbroken transmission of authority were the true measures of success. Every compliant world strengthened the Imperium, not only by its resources or location, but by its contribution to a coherent, galaxy-spanning structure. Even as he coordinated fleets and observed the slow assembly of unity, he maintained awareness of terror. The Emperor's presence there was constant and unseen, shaping the foundations that supported every action taken across the galaxy. Though distant, Terra's influence radiated outward, providing the ultimate framework of authority that allowed the Son of the Emperor to act with confidence and precision. The fleets moved onward, silent and deliberate, carrying the Imperium into previously uncharted space. The stars bore witness to their passage, indifferent observers to humanity's slow reconstruction of its scattered civilization. Each world added, each fleet maneuvered, each system stabilized, reinforced the Imperium's permanence, building a civilization capable of sustaining itself beyond the immediate reach of any commander. The Son of the Emperor walked among his officers and warriors, observing the quiet rhythm of preparation. Every individual contributed to the whole. Fleets maintained, records cataloged, governance aligned, and knowledge preserved. Their work reinforced the web of unity, each action a thread strengthening the fabric of the Imperium. He did not measure success in immediate victory alone. The true strength of the Imperium lay in its continuity, its ability to endure. Each action, each integration, each stabilized world ensured that humanity could survive across light years, centuries, and uncountable generations. And as he gazed into the unbroken darkness beyond the fleet, he reflected on the vastness still waiting to be touched. The horizon stretched endlessly, the galaxy silent and patient, yet within it, the Imperium advanced deliberate and unstoppable. Humanity moved as one, guided by purpose, reinforced by discipline, and shaped by the unbroken hand of the Emperor carried forward by his son, weaving the threads of unity across the stars. The Imperium continued its expansion with quiet inevitability, stretching across the void like a living lattice of purpose and order. Each newly compliant world strengthened the network of humanity, reinforcing connections that spanned countless light years. The Great Crusade was no longer merely the movement of fleets or the assertion of military power. It had become the deliberate structuring of civilization itself, the careful weaving of humanity's scattered fragments into a coherent and enduring whole. From the bridge of his flagship, the son of the Emperor observed the galaxy with unwavering focus. Stars shimmered across the endless darkness, each point of light a potential addition to the Imperium, each system containing civilizations yet untouched by the reach of Terra's authority. Some had already been integrated, their populations organized, their infrastructure aligned with imperial standards, their knowledge restored. Others remained distant, isolated, and independent, awaiting the careful hand of the Crusade. Reports arrived continuously, transmitted through the astropathic network. They described the state of planets, the positions of fleets, and the conditions of populations newly brought into compliance. Some worlds welcomed the Imperium's presence, recognizing stability and purpose. Others resisted, stubbornly attempting to preserve autonomy despite the weight of inevitability. The son of the Emperor treated each report with calm deliberation, understanding that permanence required both measured force and meticulous guidance. Resistance was never unexpected, and it was never feared. When necessary, warriors acted decisively, ensuring that rebellion could not spread or threaten regional stability. Yet military victory alone was insufficient. Administrators, engineers, and scholars followed each fleet, reconstructing records, realigning governance, and restoring knowledge. The Imperium's strength was measured not by the number of battles won, but by the coherence and stability of the worlds under its authority. Even the smallest systems mattered. Each contributed to the network's integrity, reinforcing neighboring sectors and stabilizing regions. A mismanaged planet could produce instability far beyond its borders, yet careful attention and consistent oversight ensured that integration was complete and enduring. The son of the Emperor maintained his vigilance constantly, aware that the permanence of the Imperium depended on the meticulous execution of every task, no matter how minor it appeared. Coordination among the Emperor's sons was essential. Fleets acted with autonomy, yet always in alignment with the central framework of the Crusade. Astropathic communication allowed instructions to traverse vast distances instantaneously in thought, ensuring that even the most remote commanders adhered to the shared vision. Trust was absolute, reinforced by shared purpose, experience, and the certainty that every action contributed to the greater whole. Terror remained the silent center of authority, its presence pervasive despite its inaccessibility. The Emperor continued his unseen labor, shaping the foundations that allowed the Imperium to endure. His son carried out the visible work, enforcing order, integrating worlds, and maintaining the cohesion that made humanity's unity possible. The Emperor's absence on the front lines was not neglect, but trust, and that trust defined every action of the Crusade. Newly compliant worlds began to flourish under careful oversight. Administrative systems functioned efficiently. Trade routes were secured, and civic infrastructure aligned with imperial standards. Knowledge long lost to isolation was restored and cataloged. Scholars and artisans worked alongside warriors and administrators, creating a balance between authority, culture, and survival. Each world added permanence to the Imperium, strengthening the network that spanned the stars. The son of the Emperor understood the significance of these efforts. While fleets demonstrated the Imperium's strength through presence, it was a quiet, persistent work of integration that guaranteed its longevity. Stability and continuity were paramount. Each compliant world reduced the potential for rebellion, reinforced regional cohesion, and contributed to the enduring structure of human civilization. Even as expansion continued, vigilance remained essential. The galaxy's immensity permitted no complacency. New systems appeared at the edge of known space, untouched for millennia. Each discovery demanded assessment, reconstruction, and careful integration. Authority was exercised not through dominance alone, but through understanding, precision, and the persistent reinforcement of unity. The fleets moved steadily, each vessel a conduit of governance, knowledge, and protection. Their presence ensured compliance, but also transmitted the imperatives of stability and cohesion. Civilization advanced with them, each world becoming part of the Imperium structure, capable of sustaining itself and contributing to the broader network. The son of the Emperor walked among his officers and warriors, observing the rhythm of preparation. Every individual played a part. Fleets maintained, records preserved, governance established, and systems aligned. Each action reinforced a web of unity, strengthening the Imperium's permanence across countless worlds. He did not measure success in immediate victories alone. True strength lay in endurance, in the ability of the Imperium to survive beyond fleets, beyond wars, and beyond the lifespan of individual leaders. Each integration, each world restored, each network secured was a testament to the long-term vision of the Emperor and the careful, unbroken execution of his son. And as he gazed into the endless void, the galaxy stretching before him, he reflected on the vastness still waiting to be touched. Stars remained uncharted, worlds untouched, and civilizations isolated. Yet within this silence, the Imperium advanced. Humanity moved as one, deliberate and disciplined, guided by purpose, reinforced by vigilance, and shaped by the enduring hand of the Emperor, carried forward by his son. The Great Crusade had no end, only direction. Across the patient darkness, the Imperium extended its reach, bringing coherence where there had been isolation, permanence where there had been fragility, and unity where humanity had once been scattered. And in this silent work, the son of the Emperor continued his vigil, knowing that the galaxy, vast and indifferent, would witness the construction of a civilization capable of enduring across the uncountable millennia of the future.